The entire class erupted in laughter when Mr. Carter, the self-satisfied AP, the calculus instructor, passed the chalk to the seasoned janitor, Ruth Jenkins. She was merely a janitor, a gentle, reserved woman with hands calloused from years of diligent labor. However, when Mr. Carter threw down the gauntlet with a sarcastic challenge to tackle the most challenging calculus problem in the room, everyone expected her to retreat. The events that unfolded next would leave everyone in stunned silence, their mouths agape in disbelief. Ruth didn't merely address the issue, she exceeded all expectations and unveiled a brilliance that took everyone by surprise. Before we dive in, please give this video a thumbs up and let us know your location in the comments. Your support enables us to share more impactful narratives. Let us commence. The bell chimed, marking the beginning of third period, yet an unusual tension lingered in the atmosphere today. The students in Mr. Carter's advanced placement calculus class had grown accustomed to a particular routine: quietude, the sound of writing instruments, and the consistent cadence of the instructor's discourse. Yet today, the atmosphere in the classroom felt distinct. Ruth Jenkins, the school janitor, lingered silently by the door, diligently mopping the floors as she did each day. She slipped in unnoticed, her scuffed sneakers whispering against the gleaming floor. To many, she was merely a janitor, a shadowy presence who came in before anyone else and departed long after they had returned to their lives. Mr. Carter, on the other hand, had different intentions. Renowned for his clever humor and an insatiable desire to captivate the spotlight, he surveyed the room, his eyes sparkling with inspiration. "Class," he remarked, his tone laced with irony, "we've been grappling with this calculus problem for a week now. Perhaps Ruth can crack it." He gestured toward the board, where a particularly challenging equation was inscribed. The students, many of whom had been perplexed by the problem, erupted into laughter. Ruth hesitated briefly, her mop clutched tightly, struggling to grasp the humor behind the joke. "Come on, Ruth," Mr. Carter said with a playful smile. "I'm sure you've encountered plenty of math in this place. Why not demonstrate to the class how it's done?" He pointed to the chalkboard, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The room burst into laughter, some students casting sneers as they shifted their focus to Ruth. They assumed she would retreat, flustered, as any typical individual might. But Ruth Jenkins was far from an ordinary individual. She lingered for a moment, the laughter reverberating through the room, her thoughts swirling in a whirlwind. She was familiar with the jokes from before. Many overlooked her due to her youth, her profession, and her modest demeanor. Yet, unbeknownst to them, Ruth harbored a hidden truth. Once upon a time, she shone as a top student at a renowned university, recognized as one of the most brilliant individuals in her cohort. Life, however, had led her down an unexpected road, and she found herself cleaning floors instead of tackling intricate problems. However, today is not that day. Today, Ruth resolved to assert herself. With a steady determination, Ruth placed her mop down. The room hushed, a palpable tension hanging in the air as uncertainty loomed over what would unfold next. With deliberate grace, she approached the chalkboard, each step measured, her posture unwavering. The chalk emitted a sharp squeak as she grasped it, and in that instant, the room appeared to pause, suspended in anticipation. Ruth took a moment to reflect, dissecting the equation with care. Her eyes, keen and analytical, flicked rapidly between the figures and signs. The class observed her, some still chuckling, while others were too intrigued to turn their gaze. Mr. Carter rested against his desk, arms folded, wearing a self-satisfied expression. He was convinced she would stumble, and that was precisely what he anticipated. Yet Ruth Jenkins was determined not to falter. As her hand glided across the board, the students' laughter gradually diminished, giving way to a quiet intrigue. Ruth's calculations were meticulous, each movement intentional and thoughtful. What started as a light-hearted jest was now evolving into something much greater than anyone had anticipated. The students who had once laughed now gazed in silence, their faces transforming from skepticism to wonder. Mr. Carter's assured grin gradually disappeared, giving way to an expression of disbelief. Ruth wasn't merely addressing the issue. She, was dominating it. Upon completing her task, she took a step back from the board. The equation, once an enigmatic puzzle, now lay resolved. The room was enveloped in silence. The students, paralyzed by disbelief, were unable to process the shocking event they had just experienced. The woman they had ridiculed, the janitor they had belittled, had achieved what they believed was unachievable. She effortlessly found a solution to the problem. The atmosphere was heavy, saturated with incredulity. Silence enveloped the room, with every person frozen in place, their lips sealed tight. They were all so stunned that they couldn't even draw a breath. In that quiet moment, Ruth Jenkins, the modest janitor, had just achieved something far more precious than a mere grade honor. The atmosphere in the room was thick with silence, the consequences of Ruth's actions lingering heavily around them. Silence enveloped the room, and stillness reigned supreme. For an extended moment it seemed as though time had come to a standstill, with only the sound of Ruth's breath and the delicate scratching of chalk against the board breaking the silence. Mr. Carter remained standing, propped against his desk, struggling to grasp the reality of the situation that had just unfolded. The self-satisfied expression he had displayed just moments before vanished, giving way to a blend of bewilderment and an emerging appreciation, an unexpected occurrence. Yet it was the students who first shattered the stillness. A soft murmur emerged from the shadows, a tone faint yet laden with skepticism. Did she truly just figure that out? A handful of heads shifted, curious to identify the source of the voice. Then they turned their gaze to Ruth, their eyes filled with wonder. Gradually, the joy of their earlier laughter shifted into a different emotion, marvel. Some of the students who had previously ridiculed her were now gazing, mouths agape, uncertain of how to respond. Ruth remained silent. She remained poised, her posture unwavering, as the equation on the board appeared to radiate beneath the fluorescent glow. It felt as though the challenge had been vanquished, not merely addressed, but utterly overcome, and it had been achieved by an individual they all believed was unfit for such an accomplishment. A handful of students started to share anxious looks. One murmured, She's a prodigy." Yet Ruth, remaining silent, had no desire for any form of acknowledgement. This was not about demonstrating superiority or flaunting her skills. It was about seizing the moment. It was about restoring a sense of dignity and strength that had been taken away over time. Ruth had faced underestimation before. Throughout her life, others had formed opinions about her based on her profession, her youth, and her modest presence. To many, she seemed to fade into the background, a figure easily disregarded or forgotten. Yet Ruth had discovered long ago that the world frequently misinterpreted those who toiled in the background. They perceived her as nothing more than a janitor, a simple servant tasked with tidying up after others. Yet what remained hidden from their understanding, what they could never have fathomed, was that Ruth Jenkins was far more than an ordinary janitor. Once she was on the fast track to becoming a world-class mathematician, a standout student with a mind capable of effortlessly solving the most intricate problems. Yet existence had a tendency to alter trajectories. Obligations to her family, economic challenges, and a succession of tough choices had compelled her to set aside her aspiration of pursuing a career in mathematics. She accepted the position as a janitor, never anticipating it would evolve into her lasting vocation. It was a means to an end, a way to sustain herself, yet it didn't reflect her true essence. Today, in this classroom, she had reminded everyone and herself of the brilliance she still held, even if it had been concealed. Beneath years of routine and overlooked effort, the bell chimed, marking the conclusion of class, yet the students remained still. Everyone lingered, reluctant to part ways just yet. Ruth approached the door, mop in hand, but just as she was about to step outside, Mr. Carter finally spoke up. "Ruth," he said, his voice gentler now, infused with a blend of admiration and an undercurrent of something akin to regret. I was unaware. Ruth pivoted to meet his gaze, her eyes tranquil and unwavering. His apology was unnecessary for her. She truly required nothing from him. She had already demonstrated all that was required of her. She nodded silently, a subtle, understanding smile gracing her lips as she exited the classroom. With the door clicking shut, the students gradually started to awaken from their stillness. A handful remained in disbelief, grappling with the reality of what they had just experienced. They exchanged quiet words, their voices barely rising above a whisper. "Were you aware of her intelligence?" A student inquired, the question imbued with a sense of curiosity. Another responded, "I never imagined she had it in her. I feel a bit self-conscious." In the days that ensued, Ruth's standing started to evolve. The students who had previously overlooked her, the ones who had ridiculed her, began to perceive her in a new light. They started to realize that Ruth Jenkins held depths beyond initial appearances. She was more than just the janitor. She was a figure shrouded in mystery, a narrative of unfulfilled promise, a woman whose journey had veered off course, yet still possessed the spark of extraordinary talent within her. Ruth continued with her tasks, approaching her work as though everything remained the same. Yet beneath the surface, she sensed a change had occurred, not solely for herself, but for all who had experienced that moment. They recognized her true self, a figure who had been overlooked, yet ultimately demonstrated her value. And Ruth Jenkins had finally stepped into the light. The upcoming days at Jefferson High felt distinct. Ruth Jenkins, the janitor, had transformed into a quiet icon. Once overlooked by her peers, she now found herself the focus of their attention. They acknowledged her in the hallways with a quiet nod of respect, as if they had finally come to understand something they had overlooked for far too long. It wasn't merely her ability to tackle challenges that had captivated them. It was how she managed the whole situation. She stood confidently before the class, demonstrating that she was defined by much more than her job title. What truly left them in awe was that Ruth had revealed to them something they hadn't realized. They were missing the strength found in quiet confidence. Mr. Carter, the very educator who had boldly confronted Ruth from the outset, was certainly no exception. His mind was consumed by the events that unfolded in that classroom. The self-assured man who had once exuded certainty now grappled with doubts about his own choices. For years he had viewed Ruth merely as a supporting figure in the unfolding narrative of high school life, a person dedicated to maintaining cleanliness, ensuring the floors were swept, the bathrooms were spotless, and the school environment remained orderly. But now he realized he had completely misjudged her. One afternoon, a week after the incident, Mr. Carter stood at the threshold of the janitor's closet. He found himself questioning the reasons behind his actions. Perhaps it stemmed from a sense of remorse, or perhaps it was just the instinct to confront reality. He tapped gently. "Ruth," he called, his voice wavering. Ruth lifted her gaze from the bucket she was scrubbing, her expression as inscrutable as ever. She had discovered long ago the wisdom of avoiding the pursuit of attention, yet upon catching sight of Mr. Carter standing there, a wave of curiosity washed over her, leaving her to ponder the purpose of his presence. "May I have a moment of your time?" he inquired, his voice gentler than normal. Ruth nodded slowly, placing the mop aside and wiping her hands on her uniform. She sensed that this dialogue would be different from the previous ones. This time, she sensed the transformation in the atmosphere, the alteration in their relationship. "Certainly, Mr. Carter," she responded, her tone unwavering. Yet there was a certain warmth to it, a subtle recognition that she had transformed from the woman who had entered that classroom just a week prior. Mr. Carter entered the janitor's closet, glancing around at the chaotic array of cleaning supplies with the scent of bleach and soap hanging in the air. He cleared his throat, a subtle prelude to the words that would follow. "I simply wanted to express my apologies. I wasn't aware of the person I was engaging with." Ruth arched an eyebrow, her silence speaking volumes. The apology, while surprising, was unwarranted. The instant she unraveled that equation, she had already absolved him in her thoughts. Yet this was unlike anything else. Mr. Carter was admitting his mistake. It was uncommon. She spoke softly, revealing that you were unaware. The majority do not. However, that doesn't imply I lacked the capability from the very beginning. It simply indicates that I've kept it concealed for quite a while. Mr. Carter nodded, absorbing the gravity of her words. For years I've been teaching here, and I've consistently believed that I was the most knowledgeable individual present. Yet you have imparted a lesson I was unaware I needed to grasp. At times, the most exceptional thinkers are not the ones who bask in the limelight. At times, they are the individuals who labor in silence without drawing attention. Ruth's gaze became a touch gentler. Each of us walks our own journey, Mr. Carter. It simply guided me to this place. However, that doesn't imply I lack value to contribute. There was a brief stillness, and for an instant, Ruth caught a glimmer of something in Mr. Carter's gaze, a sentiment akin to respect, yet possessing a profound depth. Acknowledgement of her value, not merely in her role as a janitor, but as an individual. He cleared his throat once more, straightening his posture. "I want to make it right," he declared, his voice resolute now. "I will certainly advocate for you. You are meant for greater things than what this position offers." Ruth was surprised by his words, yet she managed to conceal her reaction. She had never pursued acknowledgement or preferential treatment. She had navigated her existence free from the desire for approval from others. However, Mr. Carter's gesture seemed to embody a modest triumph, a subtle, nearly unnoticed victory. She offered a subtle smile, yet her demeanor stayed modest. "I appreciate it, Mr. Carter, but I'm all set for." "No, I find myself precisely in the right place at this moment. This is truly all I require." Mr. Carter paused, his expression contemplative as he sought the perfect words to convey his thoughts. Ultimately, all words had faded away. He had absorbed. The lesson, well, Ruth Jenkins transcended the role of a mere janitor. She was an undeniable power. He would always remember the lesson she imparted to him. As he exited the janitor's closet, Ruth resumed her tasks, gripping her mop firmly. The corridors of Jefferson High thrummed with the energy of students hurrying to their next classes. Yet, Ruth moved forward with a serene assurance. She demonstrated to everyone that no individual, regardless of their profession or looks, could ever be completely overlooked. She stood firm, demonstrating to them the essence of truly acknowledging a person for their true self, rather than merely their outward appearance. In an instant, everything she knew had transformed. As the weeks rolled by, Jefferson High underwent a remarkable transformation. Ruth Jenkins, who was once a mere shadow in the periphery, now held a stature of respect that few could have foreseen. The source wasn't solely the students. The faculty as well started to perceive her from a new perspective. Some of the educators, who had once brushed her off with a casual gesture, now regarded her with newfound respect. Ruth's subtle presence started to transform the school's ambiance, and it wasn't solely due to her exceptional intellect. She moved with a grace that suggested she had no need to seek validation, yet somehow imparted wisdom to those around her, without uttering a single phrase. One morning, as Ruth diligently cleaned the cafeteria, Principal Davis happened to stroll by. He had always been a man of few words, yet this time he paused. "Ruth," he began, his voice wavering, "I need to speak. With you." Ruth paused in her sweeping, her gaze lifting in astonishment. "What thoughts are occupying your mind, Mr. Davis?" The principal paused, seemingly in the midst of collecting his thoughts. "I've come across some intriguing stories regarding the events that unfolded in Mr. Carter's class." He halted, his face a mask of ambiguity. "The students have been engaged in conversation. People are labeling you as a genius, and truthfully, I believe they have a point." Ruth experienced a brief, exhilarating swell of pride at the term genius. She had never encountered it as a descriptor for herself, but hearing it now from the principal carried a different weight. It seemed well-deserved, yet she kept it hidden. In response, she offered a courteous nod. "I don't have to be exceptionally clever, Mr. Davis. I'm simply fulfilling my responsibilities." The principal observed her intently, as though he were on a quest for some elusive truth. "I've come across stories of your past, Ruth, about how you were once destined to be a mathematician." "I was unaware of that. I was completely unaware of any of that." Ruth shrugged, a subtle smile playing on her lips. "The majority do not. Life has a unique tendency to guide us down various paths." Principal Davis appeared to ponder his thoughts for a moment before proceeding. "Have something important to share with you. I've been reflecting on our operations, considering our treatment of individuals and the staff members. You've revealed to me that my perspective has been misguided." He cleared his throat, preparing to speak. "Your words have brought to light the inherent worth within each individual, regardless of their role or history." Ruth remained silent. She had no interest in his accolades or acknowledgement. She had come to terms long ago with her current place in life, yet she felt a subtle sense of satisfaction as the dynamics began to change, as individuals started to look deeper than the surface. "I have something to present to you, Ruth, Principal," Davis stated, his tone now unwavering. "A part-time position is available in the math department. It may not be much, but it's an opportunity to reconnect with your passion. One could instruct, assist learners with complex challenges, or even conduct some extracurricular tutoring sessions. What are your thoughts?" Ruth experienced a tightness in her throat. The proposal was alluring, so alluring that it sent her heart into a frenzy. For a fleeting moment, she envisioned herself in the classroom, positioned before a blackboard, elucidating intricate equations to a gathering of enthusiastic students. It had been ages since she had considered the idea of teaching, yet she dismissed the thought, banishing the image from her consciousness. "Thank you for the generous offer, Mr. Davis. Truly I feel that way, but that journey is no longer mine to pursue." She inhaled deeply. "I've discovered my niche here, engaging in the work I'm passionate about. I find satisfaction in that." The principal regarded her with evident admiration for her resilience and lucidity. He acknowledged this with a slow nod. "Just remember, Ruth, the door is always open for you to teach here if you decide to reconsider. Your potential has already been demonstrated in remarkable ways." Ruth offered a subtle yet sincere smile. "I appreciate it, Mr. Davis, but I'm precisely in the right place for me." Once the principal had departed, Ruth resumed her tasks. Yet this time, a transformation had taken root within her. She was presented with the chance to return to her former passion, yet she opted for an alternate journey, and it was one that had granted her tranquility. The institution might have perceived her as merely a janitor, yet Ruth was fully aware of her true identity. She transcended the confines of a job title or a faded dream. She embodied strength, intelligence, and a quiet resilience that had accompanied her throughout the years. And if anyone were to recall her, it would be for that very reason. The whispers of Ruth's exceptional talent echoed through the halls of the school, yet what held the greatest significance was that they had ceased to hold any significance for her. She had demonstrated all that was necessary to demonstrate. With that, she strode through the halls, exuding a quiet confidence that was unassailable. Months have passed, and Ruth Jenkins has transformed into more than a mere legend at Jefferson High. She had transformed into an emblem of strength, of concealed abilities, of individuals who remain in the shadows, yet possess the potential to alter the course of everything. Ruth never sought acknowledgement, and yet it came to her. The peers who once mocked her, the educators who questioned her abilities, now regarded her with admiration. The reality was inescapable. Ruth revealed that true brilliance often arrives in the most unexpected forms. At times it manifests as a custodian. One afternoon, while Ruth strolled through the hallways, she caught snippets of a conversation between two students. They found themselves talking about her, a frequent topic of conversation these days. Unbeknownst to them, she was merely a few steps behind. "Have you heard the latest about Mrs. Jenkins?" one of them inquired, clearly filled with wonder. "I heard she tackled a calculus problem as if it were a mere trifle. It was said that she had fair background in mathematics prior to her joining this place. Isn't that hard to fathom? An extraordinary custodian with remarkable intellect." The other student nodded, their eyes filled with wonder. "Indeed, I've heard she's providing guidance to some of the highest achievers at the moment. She had the potential to be a professor, if that was her desire. It's absolutely wild." Ruth found herself smiling quietly, a soft expression of joy crossing her face. In a certain sense, these students had a point. She had the potential to become a professor, a mathematician, or pursue any other path, yet her life had veered onto an unexpected path, and that was perfectly fine. She discovered tranquility in her endeavors, regardless of others' expectations. As she strolled by, Ruth found herself pondering whether they had genuinely grasped her essence. They praised her brilliance and intelligence, as though those were the only qualities that defined her. They were unaware of the most significant lesson she had absorbed throughout her life, the one that had genuinely molded her being. It wasn't about your abilities or your intelligence. It was about discovering your own space and embracing tranquility with your current situation, no matter the opinions of others. On that particular evening, Ruth found herself answering an unforeseen phone call. Once more, it was Principal Davis. "Ruth," he said, his tone grave, "I would like to discuss something with you." Ruth experienced a subtle flicker of discomfort. "How are you today, Mr. Davis?" "Something significant is unfolding," he stated, his tone now filled with urgency. "A fresh initiative is set to unfold throughout the district, and we've been invited to participate. They aim to highlight genuine success narratives, individuals who triumphed over challenges and achieved success despite the odds stacked against them. They seek an individual to share their story, to motivate and uplift others. I have put in a good word for you." Ruth paused, lost in thought. She had never sought the limelight, nor had she envisioned herself in such a role. Yet, within her, a voice whispered that this was a chance to unveil her narrative, to convey to others that embracing one's uniqueness is not only acceptable but essential, even when the world insists on conformity. She inhaled deeply. "Thank you, Mr. Davis, but I'm uncertain if I'm the best fit for this role." "You are, Ruth. More than you realize," he said, his voice brimming with conviction. "Your demonstration of true success has already left an impression on everyone here. It's not about seeking attention. It's about embracing your authentic self. That's the message that needs to resonate with everyone." Ruth sensed the gravity of his words, yet the idea of addressing an audience, revealing her story, filled her with anxiety. She felt uncertain about embracing that level of attention, yet the memory of the students who admired her lingered, particularly how their expressions transformed upon discovering her true identity. This could be the opportunity to demonstrate that anyone, regardless of their origins, has the power to create change. "I will do it," Ruth finally declared, her voice unwavering. "I will convey my narrative for them." The choice was final. Ruth was ready to emerge from the shadows and embrace the light, not for accolades, but for the students who needed to receive her message. She was indifferent to the applause, unconcerned with recognition, yet she yearned to guide others in discovering their own journey, just as she had once done. The day of the event dawned, and Ruth found herself before a gathering of students, educators, and community leaders. The atmosphere shifted as she started to speak, her voice steady yet commanding. "I'm not a genius," she began, "but I've come to understand that what truly counts isn't your level of intelligence or the expectations others have of you. What truly counts is discovering your unique path. And even if you find yourself in an unexpected place, it doesn't signify failure. It signifies that you have discovered an alternative route. At times, that becomes the crucial insight we need to grasp." Silence enveloped the room for what felt like an eternity after she concluded. Only quiet, no clapping, no enthusiastic shouts, just stillness. Yet within that quiet, Ruth understood that her message had found its way to them. In that instant, she understood that she was not reliant on the approval of others. She had already demonstrated to herself that she was sufficient. As she stepped away from the stage, a wave of tranquility enveloped her. The path she had traveled, the insights she had gained, it was all worthwhile. From this moment on, Jefferson High would forever view her through a different lens,